In terms of looter shooters, the Borderlands franchise has generally been regarded as the best there is. And now we have the newest entry in the series, Borderlands 3. But it's been 5 years since the pre-sequel came out and 7 since Borderlands 2 was released. And after all that time, how does Borderlands 3 compare? Well, thankfully, it is still a pretty fun looter shooter experience. But unfortunately, there are quite a few issues that pop up this time around. Now, the main story sees you taking control of one of 4 different Vault Hunters, and you join forces with a gang called the Crimson Raiders, who are at war with the Children of the Vault. You see, the Children of the Vault seek to take control of the Vault Crystals so they can... You know what, never mind. It's basically just bad people want to do bad things, so stop them because they're bad. It's pretty simplistic stuff, though that's not the worst thing because a lot of the appeal of the Borderlands story has always been in the interesting characters and good villains. But unfortunately, the villains in Borderlands 3 are incredibly bland and honestly just annoying. They aren't threatening in any way, they aren't funny, they aren't charming, and they usually just pop up to make a few lame jokes or weak youth culture references and then dip. Actually, that pretty much describes most of the main characters in this game. They're all irritating or just barely there. Lilith refuses to stop calling you killer, and her weird-ass eyes are constantly shoved in your face.
Don't let them anywhere near Tannis.
Why did they do this? Like, why is there just eyes on my screen?
I'm uncomfortable when it happens. Like,
My
look,
friend.
if you want to talk about safe spaces, I think I need one after this.
Vaughn makes a few jokes in the opening hours and then kind of disappears for the rest of the game. Maya's there for like 2 seconds. Tannis, Moxie, and Ellie are all just kind of background characters, and I don't even really remember the names of the 20 plus other one-note characters you're going to run into. They're all just so basic. I mean, one of them literally has the defining character trait of, I want coffee. So, yeah, we're not exactly dealing with the most interesting cast here. Though I will say, this game kind of feels like a tale of two halves. On one side, you have all the main story stuff where the writing feels like the definition of how do you do, fellow kids? But at the same time, there are the small stories and the side content, which I found actually entertaining and pretty funny. To be honest, it almost feels like the main story was written at a different time than the rest of the game, or at least by a different group of writers, because for the most part, the side stuff is genuinely good. The absurd little missions, the random moments that catch you off guard, the ridiculous lines of dialogue that enemies scream before dying like, "My chili recipe dies with me!" All that stuff is great and genuinely had me laughing out loud at times.
I was not expecting that.
And part of the reason why I think it was so effective was because of how weird, random, and unique it was. It wasn't trying to reference a meme or any sort of youth culture like this Raider life, or the guy who won't stop asking you to check out his mixtape, yo. It was just solid writing that stood out on its own, and that's definitely when the story's at its best, when the jokes feel natural to what is happening. Overall though, I'll say that the characters aren't that interesting, the plot doesn't really go anywhere, and the villains are frankly awful. But the game still has its fair share of really funny moments thrown in here and there. It's pretty mediocre overall, with some highlights. Now in terms of gameplay, Borderlands 3 is pretty similar to the previous games, which is a good thing because as I said before, those games are generally regarded as some of the best looter shooters out there. However, the big special thing that Borderlands 3 advertises is that there are over 1 billion different guns in the game. Which is, it's partially true, yes, because technically they're all different, but let's be real, you're gonna find some guns that are pretty similar. That being said, there's still a really solid amount of weapons to choose from, and you will be constantly swapping out new ones and seeing what works best. It's a really big loot fest, and to no one's surprise, that makes for an engaging loot. The gunplay itself is pretty tight, and there's enough variety in the way the weapons handle to give you some different playstyles to choose from, and despite the story being bland, the missions themselves were mostly solid with lots of interesting fights, though there were a few low points thrown in, with some of the bosses being just trash, and this mission where you literally redo the same shit twice in a row. You fight your way in, you fight the boss, you fight your way out, you get this god-awful filter on your game that hurts my head, you fight back in, you fight the boss again, and you fight your way out again. I will say, this seemed like an outlier as I don't really remember any other part of the game reusing the same stuff so blatantly, but that doesn't make up for the fact that this section was really drawn out for no reason. There's also an issue where if you do too many side missions like my friend and I did, you may end up out-leveling every main mission by like a lot. In our case, around 6 levels. Yeah, I'm not sure how it happened, but somehow we ended up spending like 4 hours playing missions that were well under our level and getting worthless loot as a result.
Can I ask how none of the review outlets mentioned, oh, just by the way, by playing the game normally, and then even avoiding some side missions, you'll be, 7 levels over the recommended level.
quick side note while editing. I wasn't quite clear enough with how serious this issue is, but it is really serious because like the main point of the game is to get more loot. Like it's a constant loot fest, that's the game. And when all the loot you're getting is just useless, it really hurts your drive to continue.
Also, whoever designed the driving controls on PC is an asshole. They don't let you turn using the keyboard, you can only go forward or back, and then the mouse is to turn. But that also means that it's pretty much impossible to aim and shoot while driving because if you turn your mouse, well, the whole car is going to turn with you. Overall though, the gunplay is pretty tight, the moment-to-moment gameplay is really engaging, and the wide array of different guns gives you a lot of possibilities. There's some issues like the balancing and the stupid-ass driving, but those are pretty minor compared to how fun the majority of the gameplay is. Like the previous games, Borderlands 3 has a nice cel-shaded art style that lends itself well to the cartoony nature of the world and the characters. Now, it's obviously not a super realistic looking game, but I still think the textures were solid and the lighting was pretty good too. I like the design of the different worlds, and while they weren't incredible, I thought they were diverse enough to keep it interesting. Though for me, the standout here is definitely the music. I was not expecting this to be as good as it is, but we got some real bangers here, and I really like the variety of the different tracks. Overall, really good stuff across the board. Okay, so normally when I have a cons section, it's because the game has a ton of miscellaneous issues, but this time it's just one, the performance. See, this game has two different ways you can run it, DirectX 11 and DirectX 12. When running in DirectX 11, the performance is just not good. With a Ryzen 7 1800X and an RTX 2080 running at 1080p, I was getting anywhere from 40 to 90 FPS with tons of stutters throughout. Now this was super irritating, so I decided to try DirectX 12 and see what happened. And while it took 5 times as long to load into the game, I started getting around 100 to 120 FPS, and now with drops only as low as the 70s. Now, some people have reported other issues with DirectX 12, but either way, I have no idea why there's such a big difference between the two. For such a high-profile game, DirectX 11 should not be running so poorly. I don't know why. Like, it's recommended, and it's just so poorly implemented. I don't get it. I don't have an answer for it. I don't know. It's really confusing, but I would highly recommend that you try running it on DirectX 12. Now, overall, this isn't the biggest issue for me, since switching to DirectX 12 fixed my issues, but it's certainly worth mentioning because it is just awful on DirectX 11. Okay, so yeah, there are definitely some issues with this game, but overall, I still really think it's a fun experience and worth checking out if you're a fan of the series or if you're just interested in general. It's got some really engaging looter-shooter gameplay, some great aesthetics, and a few good jokes in between some unfortunate issues and some poor writing. It's a good game that will take you about 30 to 40 hours to complete, and I would say it's worth the $60, though some may want to wait for a sale, and that's fine too. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this review. Sorry it took so long between the last review to this one. Like I said, I've been working on this new game. Got some other stuff coming. Hope to be back more on YouTube. So please, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Check out my other reviews, check out my other videos in general. I hope to have another review out before Modern Warfare comes out, and then I'll probably play that and review it as well. Yeah, so just stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.